Today's text is number 37. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Thank you. So, text 37. Iti langhita maryadang pakshaka saptame hani dangshati sma kulangaram chodito me tata druham. Iti langhita maryadang pakshaka saptame hani dangshati sma kulangaram chodito me tata druham. Iti langhita maryadham takshaka saptame hani dangshati sma kulangaram chodito me tata druham. Please chant.
Iti langhita maryadam takshaka saptame hani dangshati sma kulangaram chodito me tata druham.
Hare Krishna. Iti langhita maryadam dakshakaha shabdame hani dakshyani shama dakhyani sma kulangaram judito me tata druham.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Iti langhita maryadam taksha saptame hani dakshati sma kulangaram chodito me tata druham. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Iti langhita maryadam takshakaha saptame ahani dangshayati sma kulangaram chodito me tate dhruvam. Hare Krishna. Okay.
Anyone else? Okay. Iti, thus. Langhita, surpassing. Maryadam, etiquette. Takshakaha, snake bird. Saptame, on the 7th. Ahani, a day. Dangshyati, will bite. Sma, certainly. Kula angaram, the wretched of the dynasty. Choditaha, having done. Me, my. Tata druham, enmity toward the father. Translation. The Brahmana's son cursed the king thus. On the 7th day from today, a snake bird will bite the most wretched of that dynasty, Maharaj Parikshit, because of his having broken the laws of etiquette by insulting my father. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Thus, the beginning of the misuse of Brahminical power began, and gradually the Brahmanas in the age of Kali became devoid of both Brahminical powers and culture. The Brahmana boy considered Maharaj Parikshit to be Kulangara, or the wretched of the dynasty. But factually, the Brahmana boy himself was so, because only from him did the Brahmana caste become powerless, like the snake whose poisoned teeth are broken. The snake is fearful as long as his poisoned teeth are there. Otherwise, he is fearful only to children. The personality of Kali conquered the Brahmana boy first, and gradually the other castes. Thus, the whole scientific system of the orders of society in this age has assumed the form of a vitiated caste system, which is now being uprooted by another class of men similarly influenced by the age of Kali. One should see the root cause of vitiation and not try to condemn this system as it is without knowledge of its scientific value. The translation again. This is Shringi speaking his curse. The Brahmana's son cursed the king thus. On the seventh day from today, a snake bird will bite the most wretched one of that dynasty, Maharaj Parikshit, because of its having broken the laws of etiquette by insulting my father. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminitya Namane Namaste Sarasvate Devi Gaurvani Vicharni Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschati Deshitarne Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindubhya Eva Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Hare Krishna. Thank you all again for joining. So today we're going to talk about justification of misbehavior. Now, we've been speaking about this for the last couple of days for obvious reasons, because this Brahmana boy, Shringi, I use that term lightly. We'll call him the son of a Brahmin, Shringi. He was immature. He wasn't fully trained. And so he misbehaved. He got word from a friend. He thought the situation was dire. He acted on impulse beyond what he normally should have acted. And it was a cause of misbehavior. But he's justifying it. He's saying, well, no, Maharaj Parikshit, he did a terrible thing. He's the, let's see, what was the term? Something of the dynasty, the wretched one of that dynasty, right? So in his eyes, Maharaj Parikshit is the reason why the world is just so terrible, right? That's his opinion here. That he's thinking, see, this is why the world is in such a bad state, because you have emperors like Parikshit who they're supposed to be protecting us, and they're coming into our homes, and they're putting snakes around brahmanas who are superior to them, and he thought his father died because of a snake bite, so of course he's reacting on some misinformation. But still, even if that information would have turned out to be true, he still should have acted in a very different way. And so this will all come out. But this is what happens when we take matters into our own hands instead of referring to the Shastra, right? Or one's guru and the sadhus, because the guru is going to give advice based on the Shastra, and the sadhus are going to lead by example based on how they're acting according to Shastra. So it's all based on the Shastra. So when we're confronted with something that has to be resolved, if we're not consulting Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra to resolve it in that very specific particular way, then we're just creating a big mess. Or as Srila Rupa Goswami says, we're creating an unnecessary disturbance in society. So we've talked about this for quite a bit. So in today's verse, of course, he calls Maharaj Parikshit the wretched one of the dynasty, which we all know that description doesn't fit Maharaj Parikshit. Actually, because of Maharaj Parikshit and his rule, and because he was such a pure devotee, Kali wasn't even able to actually infiltrate. In other words, it was time for Kali, right? It's the age of Kali. But since Maharaj Parikshit was there, and since he was such a good king, good emperor, everyone was completely satisfied. They were protected. There was no need for them to engage in the behavior that is normal for Kali Yuga. And so, if anything, he was. You could say that there was an anomaly going on, right? And he's the cause of that anomaly, but it was an anomaly in a positive direction. In Kali, people are supposed to be acting in a certain way, but they weren't yet, because he was leading in such a good way that, that Kali personified wasn't able to infiltrate. So it was certainly an anomaly, but it wasn't the anomaly that Shringi thought. He wasn't the wretched of the dynasty. He was actually the gem of the dynasty. So anyway, his curse is that because of his having broken the laws of etiquette by insulting my father, he must die. He will die in 7 days from this snake bird, this takshaka, right? So when I opened, I said that this is what happens when we take matters into our own hands instead of referring to Shastra. Now, at this point, one may argue, well, it's possible that Shringi, who was being trained as a Brahmana's son, he could have actually been referring to Shastra. Now, it wouldn't be Shastra in the way that we have access to right now, because this obviously took place before the Srimad Bhagavatam was spoken to Maharaj Parikshit by Shukadev Goswami. But the activities, the pastimes that are given in Srimad Bhagavatam happened just then. And so he's aware of some of them. We know that because he already mentioned that Krishna has just wound up his earthly pastimes. He's not here. And so now, it's up to the brahmanas to, up to me basically to take care. So he knows of some of the events that happened that we know about in Shastra, right? So one might at this point come up with an argument that maybe Shringi was actually basing this on what we know today as a precedent, right? So lawyers these days, when they're trying to prove their point, or they're trying to establish a case, they look back in all of the previous cases that were similar, and they try to find some sort of precedent which will allow the judge to see that, okay, this isn't far-fetched. My argument that I'm trying to present to you isn't far-fetched. This is a justified behavior, right? So can anyone think of something that it might be a precedent where there was a breach in etiquette in the Srimad Bhagavatam, where there's a breach of etiquette, and because of that breach of etiquette, I'm just talking about a simple breach of etiquette, I'm not talking about gross misbehavior, that the person who breached etiquette was then killed. Can anyone think of a pastime in Srimad Bhagavatam where that occurred?
Ramaharshan Sutta and Lord Balaram.
Yes, thank you, Prabhu. Ramaharshana Sutta and Lord Balaram. So Lord Balaram was traveling around. He was avoiding the battle of Kurukshetra. He didn't want to get involved with that because he was sympathetic to both sides. He understood where everyone was coming from, and he didn't want to engage in that. So he's going around. And he comes to Naimisharanya, and the sages are performing a fire sacrifice, as they do there. It's a good place to do that. And Ramaharshana Sutta, although he was born, he's a Sutta, which means he's not born in a strictly Brahmana family. It was a mix between a Brahmana and a Kshatriya. But he was given the post of a Brahmana. He was given the seat of a Brahmana, because we all know that it's we are to determine someone's position not by their birth but by their qualification. So the sages there understood that although he had one parent that was a Brahmana and the other one was a Kshatriya, he had some qualifications that were Brahminical, so they gave him this position. But Lord Balaram understood that even though externally he had some of these qualifications, internally he was actually proud. And Lord Balaram, he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead, so he knows these things. It wasn't a guess, it wasn't a whim. He understood, okay, this person's proud. And so when Lord Balaram, the Supreme Lord himself, walked into the assembly, everyone stood up except for Ramaharshana. It seemed like a simple breach of etiquette. actually, under the circumstances, someone sitting on that seat doesn't necessarily have to stand up according to the etiquette because of what they're doing. But because it was the Supreme Lord, and because Lord Balaram actually understood his mind, he knew that actually this Ramaharshana, he was actually proud of this situation, and that's why he didn't stand up. So Lord Balaram took a piece of kusha grass and he dispatched him. So there is what one might say precedence that someone does this, bypasses this law of etiquette. He breaks the laws of etiquette, and therefore there's death, right? So we might make this argument, right? So I'm just going to read a small section from Krishna book, chapter 78, based on this pastime, Ramaharshana Sutta. Srila Prabhupada writes, as stated in the Bhagavad Gita, a person who is actually a Brahmana and is very learned must automatically become very gentle also. But although Ramaharshana Sutta was very learned and had been given the chance to become a Brahmana, he had not become gentle. From this, we can understand that one who is puffed up by material acquisitions cannot acquire the gentle behavior befitting a Brahmana. The learning of such persons is as good as a valuable jewel decorating the hood of a serpent. Despite the valuable jewel on the hood, a serpent is still a serpent and is as fearful as an ordinary serpent. If a person does not become meek and humble, all his studies of the Vedas and Puranas and his vast knowledge of the Shastras are simply outward dress, like the costume of a theatrical artist dancing on the stage. Lord Balaram considered, quote, I have appeared in order to chastise false persons who are internally impure, but externally pose themselves as very learned and religious. My killing of such person is proper to check them from further sinful activity. End quote. So this is Lord Balaram's consideration, right? So do we think that this would be a good argument for Shringi? Well, Lord Balaram, he saw someone breach etiquette, and so the sentence was death. So maybe also from this breach of etiquette, there should also be death. Does anyone think that that might work out? Does that work? I see some thoughtful faces. They're thinking about it. I only see two faces, but you don't want to go there, huh?
I have a thought for
Okay, go ahead.
I remember hearing that the punishment has to be proportionate.
Yes.
Yeah, so it seems like it would be improportionate in Shringi's case, perhaps.
Okay. Okay. That's something to consider. Anything else to add, Brihad Mridanga? You look very thoughtful.
I don't know so much. The only thought that comes to mind is it's the Supreme Lord coming in the other case, and it's the Emperor in this case. So, yeah, it's a different tattva.
Yeah, there are different situations there. Sure, sure. Dr. Bob, you have your hand raised. What would you like to add?
Hare Krishna. Based on that example, could you argue the opposite way that the Brahmana was the one that was disrespectful, and based on that Shastra could have been killed?
You know what? Now that you mention it, you're absolutely right. So Shringi might try to refer to something like this to try to prove his point, but then it would actually end up proving that he's the one that was overstepping his boundary. Because just like Ramaharshana Sutta, he was taking the position of a Brahmana, but he had some pride there, right? And so therefore, he was the one at fault. It wasn't Lord Balaram. So Shringi also having the position of a Brahmana, but overstepping his boundary, thinking he was more powerful. He actually, in the quote, he's and we'll get to that. He's actually saying, well, now that Krishna is gone, it's up to me to do this punishment. And then he said, behold my power, right? So he's showing everyone, I'm doing this, right? So he's considering himself basically more powerful than Krishna, or as powerful as Krishna. He's taking his position, right? So therefore, if he tried to use this as an argument, for example, then it would actually end up backfiring on him, because it's showing that he was not acting properly in the Brahmanical. So anyway, we could list different things like this. We could have this debate. We could say, all right, well, Maharaj Parikshit, he's a Kshatriya. So Kshatriyas sometimes, since they have that mode of passion, sometimes they act very quickly on something, and then later they realize, okay, that was wrong. So sometimes, they have more leeway. We could talk about all these different things, and we could debate it, right? But the point is that this isn't how we do things. We don't try to debate things. We try to understand them through Shastra. And so the Shastra actually gives us what the proper conclusion is. And Bob, you actually hit the nail on the head when you brought that point up. Because Lord Balaram, being the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he actually understood that Ramaharshana Sutta was feeling proud of that position. And so he gave him the punishment. He gave the proper punishment, and he was also prepared to accept the consequences of doing that. Because those who know this pastime, Lord Balaram, he didn't just kill Ramaharshana Sutta with the kusha grass and then walk away. No, the Brahmanas were like, hey, actually, we put him on this seat, and we gave him these benedictions that he would have a long, healthy life, and he'd be able to. And so, we have to do something about this. So essentially, you've killed a Brahmana, right? And so Lord Balaram said, okay, well, I will take whatever punishment that you tell me is necessary. So there's a couple things going on here, because the Supreme Lord knows everything. He understood that punishment needed to be there, and he gave that punishment. But the Brahmana's word is also just as potent as the Supreme Lord's word. So since the Brahmanas there promised Ramaharshana to have the long, healthy life, etc., that also had to be true, right? So then what happened was Ramaharshana Sutta's son is Sutta Goswami. He was blessed with a long life and the ability to spread the Vedic knowledge, right? So he got all of the benefits. So in other words, the benefits of the father then lived through the son, and he also then went on pilgrimage to atone for his sin. So it needed to be done. Both things were absolutely necessary. There had to be some punishment there, so that we would understand in the future that what Brahminical culture actually is, that we actually need to follow it properly, not just externally. And we also need to understand that there are consequences. So all of this is wrapped up in this pastime. So Shringi, he's not the Supreme Lord, but he considered himself as powerful as the Supreme Lord, and he took it upon himself to decide Maharaj Parikshit's fate without understanding the circumstance, right? He heard from a friend that something happened, and it was misinformation. It was based on something that happened, but it was presented in a wrong way. He assumed that was actually what happened. He assumed that he was the I keep forgetting exactly, the wretch, what was it? The wretch of the dynasty? The most wretched of the dynasty. He assumes that all problems in this world were actually his fault. And so he gives him this, he gives him this curse, right? So, so it's clear that as Bob pointed out, this pastime actually shows that Shringi was in the wrong for overstepping his boundaries, for considering himself the controller of the situation, right? Because it's proper that he understood that Sri Krishna wound up his pastimes on earth, right? And it's also proper to understand that we do things in the service of the Lord. So it is our duty to do certain things for Krishna. What's improper is that he considered that since Krishna wrapped up his pastimes, he's no longer here to do anything about it. He's not realizing that Krishna is still in control. Not a blade of grass moves without his will, right? And so he's not considering this. He's considering that, okay, now it's up to me to punish him. And then he's bragging about it. He's showing, look at my prowess. Watch how I'll be able to remove the most wretched of this dynasty, right? So Kali personified, as we learned from the previous chapter, he had to get Emperor Parikshit out of the way, because as long as Maharaj Parikshit's there, no one's breaking any of these rules. Kali has no way to actually fully infiltrate. He's just patiently sitting there waiting, and it's his job. It's his age. This is what it's meant to happen, right? And so he's patiently waiting, and he's looking for, okay, where can I get my foot in the door here and actually do what I'm meant to do? So he couldn't do that as long as Maharaj Parikshit was around. So under normal circumstances, this just never would have occurred. It never would have happened. It was mentioned that it was, this strange fate, providence, that when Maharaj Parikshit was out, he got separated from his hunting party. He became hungry and thirsty, and he became disturbed by it. So everyone knows that a pure devotee, they can feel that, their mouth is dry, so they should drink water, and they know when it's time to eat. But they're not disturbed by these things because they know that Krishna is in control of everything. Any aspiring devotee understands this. So one may get, for example, hungry or thirsty, but one doesn't become disturbed by that. Even if, say, devotee, they get thirsty, so they go up to someone's house, no one's home. Okay, that's a little frustrating because my throat's dry, I need some water. So now I'll just try to see, maybe there's some, or maybe I see someone and they appear to be ignoring me. Okay, also no reason to be disturbed because Krishna is still in control, right? And so you just keep going until you actually get what's needed. You're not in control, Krishna's in control, right? Idam Krishna, idam namama. So this is generally how Maharaj Parikshit would have acted. He would have saw, okay, well, this fellow, he's meditating, so I'll go on to the next house. I'll find water, right? But because this circumstance had to happen, then Providence does something that when normal circumstances could never possibly cause a thing to happen, Providence will step in and do it. Can anyone give an example of another case in our Shastra where under normal circumstances, there's no possible way something could have happened, but Providence had to give it a little push? There are a few examples of this. I won't put everyone on the spot, though. Oh, do we have it on meter? No. Yes. Go ahead.
Perhaps Krishna and Arjuna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra.
Which particular pastime?
I was told that Arjuna was covered over by the external potency so that he would become bewildered and ask the questions.
Oh, I understand. Right. So him being bewildered and asking these questions, in other words, for our benefit. Yeah, that could be an example of how things under normal circumstances wouldn't happen, but Providence, yeah, sure. That's one.
How about
Dr. Bob? Yeah, go ahead.
Pandu being overtaken by lust in the woods, that wouldn't normally happen, and then because of that, then the Gita had to be spoken.
Yeah, good one. That's another good one. The one I was thinking, those are both really good examples. The one I was thinking about is the destruction of the Yadu dynasty. Right. So Krishna understood that it was time for him to wrap up all of his pastimes, which means that he's taking his entourage with him. No one can defeat the Yadu dynasty, and he's certainly not going to do it himself. So there was this strange situation where they all got intoxicated on the rice wine, and they were beating each other with what they thought were just bamboo reeds. They're, play fighting, but they happened to be the reeds that were infused with the iron filings that was from a curse from before. So in other words, the providential thing had to happen to push that along, because otherwise no one can defeat the Yadu dynasty, right? And like I said, Krishna's not going to do it himself. So this is also explained in the purports that are dealing with this particular pastime. So sometimes yes, Priyad Mridanga Prabhu.
Also Krishna's disappearance.
Yes, right. Thank you. Yeah, no one can kill Krishna because he doesn't have a material body, but he created the situation where, yeah, that's also a good example. That was the same, the arrowhead was from that same iron filings that went into those reeds. So, yeah, so here it was time for Kali to thrive. This is his age, right? Couldn't happen as long as Maharaj Parikshit's there. So Krishna makes this situation happen where he becomes disturbed by thirst. He sees that someone's there. He takes this as a slight of a breach of etiquette, because it is. You go to someone's house, they should offer you a seat, some water, and some kind words at least. There's many other things that you can offer, but at least those. And sure, he shouldn't have put that dead snake around his neck, but he did. And he did something improper. He was pushed to do this. And it wasn't a major thing that would actually, incur such a thing. But then a child hearing a different story and then giving a curse. So it's the perfect way to do this, where you can't really blame all brahmanas for for Kali Yuga coming, but you can blame those who aren't properly trained, because it's a child, right? And that's so. These are the lessons that we have to learn from these things. So this is how it it develops, right? So, okay, from yesterday's verse, this was the kicker. This is where we understood that Shringi was actually not acting properly. When he said, Adyaham shashmi pasyatta me balam, therefore I myself shall take up this matter and punish them, just witness my power, right? When we see this, when we see, okay, so you think you could do these things, Krishna's gone, now I'm going to punish you. Look at my power. Krishna doesn't do things like that. So he's taking the position of Krishna in his purport. Srila Prabhupada. Where did I write that? Okay, yeah, in his purport, Srila Prabhupada wrote, the little Brahmana wanted to show his prowess in destruction, and he had the audacity to punish such a great king as Maharaj Parikshit. He wanted to take the place of Krishna after his departure, right? So we can see just from the way he's saying, Adyaham shashmi pasyatta me balam, therefore I myself shall take up this matter and punish them, just witness my power. So we can see that. And then Srila Prabhupada is pointing it out. Yes, this is actually what's going on. He's trying to take the place of Lord Krishna. He's not understanding that, okay, even though Krishna personally wound up his earthly pastimes, he's still in control. Everything is within his power. So obviously he can take care of all these things. So he wasn't thinking in a very Brahminical way. That's the point there. So, let's see. Now, since we were talking about precedents, is there precedence for a Brahmana or a group of Brahmanas who take matters in their own hands to punish a Kshatriya?
Yeah, in the case of Prithu Maharaj, the Brahmana, killed King Vena before the birth of King Prithu.
Yes, exactly, Vena. So we can see that there's actually a big difference between Vena and Maharaj Parikshit also, because Vena, of course, he didn't just breach etiquette. He canceled Brahminical culture. He said, you're not allowed to perform sacrifices anymore. In fact, you should just worship me because I'm the most powerful here. And so this is actually also what Shringi was doing. He's taking the place. He's not as bad as Vena, obviously, but the mentality is the same, taking the place of the Supreme Lord and being the one that's in control, right? So Maharaj Parikshit, as we mentioned, while he was there, no one was breaking any rules. Vena was making people break rules. He wasn't allowing them to actually follow the rules, and he was encouraging them to actually worship him instead of Krishna. And so the Brahmanas, they didn't kill him as a punishment. They killed him because it was necessary for the world to thrive properly. It wasn't just to punish Vena, it was to save the world. And then they established another king, right? So they didn't take his position, right? They just, they did what they needed to do and then they backed off. It's very rare that a brahmana would do such a thing. Sometimes it's necessary, but brahmanas are also detached, so they do the thing and then they move on, right? There's another example. This one, it's actually mentioned in Srimad Bhagavatam, but it didn't take place during the time of the Bhagavatam. It took place about 2,400 years ago. There was a brahmana who overthrew a corrupt dynasty. It's also mentioned in Bhagavatam in the 12th canto, where it's basically talking about all the past kings, dynasties, and then it talks about some of the future ones as well. Anyone know who that is? A brahmana who overthrew a corrupt dynasty? I see that Max is unmuted, but maybe he's unmuted from before.
Is it the Buddha?
It's not, but that is a very intelligent answer, because he also came. He wasn't necessarily a brahmana who overthrew a corrupt dynasty, but he did come and do a very similar thing. That's there. But we're talking specifically, thank you for that, specifically of a brahmana who overthrew a corrupt dynasty. And it's okay. It's Chanakya Pandit, actually. So there was this dynasty, the Nanda, I think, dynasty, and they were very corrupt. So what he did was he arranged for that leader to be killed, and then he put a new leader in charge, and he just became his advisor. In other words, he understood that this king was corrupt and he had to be taken out, but he also understood that the system of varnashram was still important, and he knew he was an advisor, so he arranged for that overthrow, and then he advised the new king to lead properly. So he's also mentioned in Srimad Bhagavatam. So sometimes this is important to do, where a brahmana has to actually overthrow a kshatriya, but in Maharaj Parikshit's case, it wasn't what needed to be done, because Maharaj Parikshit was actually a good king and a good devotee, and so we can see the differences there. Okay, so we can go on like this, presenting logical arguments based on precedents given in Shastra, but until our mood comes in line with the Shastras, right? Because we were talking about different scenarios that happened in Shastras, and we were sort of discussing them. And then I pointed out that we also have to understand what the Acharyas say about it. In other words, when we refer to Shastra, it's not that we should have, we have an idea of how something should go, right? And so then we refer to Shastra to basically strengthen our argument, right? Sometimes we do this. We have to be sure that we don't do this. We have to understand the mood of the Shastra, not just, the details of Shastra. So we have to understand Shastra to the point where we understand how to apply each of these things, where to apply, when to apply. And in order to do that, we have to consult Shastra in the proper mood, not in a mood where we're just trying to find something that we already think we know, but to actually understand the subject. We have to approach our guru humbly, submissively, and with a mood of service. And we have to follow the examples of the sadhus who are also implementing Shastra in their lives. If our personal feelings toward a particular issue hold a greater influence on us than the authorized conclusions of the Shastra, then that means that we are actually worse than Shringi here. We are pretenders. We're doing basically the same thing. We're using either our logic or our sense perception to come to a conclusion, and then we're trying to get Shastra to justify our misbehavior. That's what we're talking about today, justifying our misbehavior. So in order to not do that, we actually have to understand Shastra properly. We have to approach it properly. We have to understand the mood of the Shastra. And in that way, we can actually make proper decisions, and we won't be creating unnecessary disturbances in society. The end of today's purport. I want to discuss that a little bit. It said the personality of Kali conquered the Brahmana boy first and gradually the other castes. Thus, the whole scientific system of the orders of society in this age has assumed the form of a vitiated caste system, which is now being uprooted by another class of men, pardon me, similarly influenced by the age of Kali. So Srila Prabhupada is acknowledging that the system of Varnashrama Dharma has devolved into this vitiated caste system. And this is the reason why most people don't want to attempt to even talk about Varnashrama these days, is because we see what happened when it's not followed properly, right? We see that, okay, it became corrupt, it became vitiated, it's this caste system by birth, and people are exploiting other people, and it's not a nice system the way that it exists like that. But then Srila Prabhupada said, one should see the root cause of vitiation and not try to condemn the system as it is without knowledge of its scientific value, right? So we're going to talk about that last sentence a lot. But before we do that, I want to address a statement that was made in yesterday's purport, and that was how Kali was able to infiltrate through a hole in the puffed up, inexperienced son of a Brahmana, right? So we know from the previous chapter that Kali was given 5 places to dwell. So my question is, did Shringi partake in intoxication? Did he slaughter animals? Was he associating with prostitutes, engaging in illicit sex? Was he a gambler? Did he hoard gold? How exactly did Kali infiltrate? Right? It seems to be a pretty valid question, right? So what's this hole that he was able to exploit? Now, before we get into that, and I realize I'm sort of going a little bit all over the place, but there is a method to my madness here. There are examples of people who externally, it looks like they're not following the detail, but internally they are 100% following the principle. There are also examples of people who look like externally, they're following the details perfectly, but internally they are breaking the principle. So I'm going to give an example first. So Haridas Thakur, externally one might say that, so the locals were trying to get rid of Haridas Thakur. They didn't like him. So they sent a prostitute to him to try to convince people that he's corrupt and that he should be kicked out. And so a prostitute went to see him, right? So she sits down. So these days, for example, someone would just take a photograph of that, a saintly person sitting next to a prostitute, and say, here's proof. Associating with a prostitute, therefore, we shouldn't believe anything that he has to say. Now, one might say, okay, no, we need more evidence than that. Okay, fine. So the prostitute, when she sat down, she was very clear about what her intentions were. She said, dear saintly person, I really want to enjoy with you, right? And what did he say? Did he say, no, get out of here, I don't do such things? No, he said, okay, yeah, absolutely, 100%, I will enjoy with you, but I made a vow to chant a specific amount of the Lord's names, and until I do that, I can't enjoy with you. But if you patiently sit here, and when I finish, then I will enjoy with you. So say someone got that on recording. See, he said he was going to enjoy with her. Proof. Nonsense. Rascal, right? But we know what actually happened. So he kept chanting all night, and she had to come back night after night because he didn't finish his quota to enjoy. But then she ended up, from hearing him chanting and understanding his purity, she understood, oh no, this isn't the lifestyle I want to live. And so she ended up shaving her head, becoming his disciple, chanting and serving the tulsi plant that he had there in his village. And then he moved on to go somewhere else. So externally, it may look like, oh no, see, Haridas Thakur, he was associating with this prostitute, therefore, he broke the principle. But he didn't break the principle because he wasn't affected by it. Now, we shouldn't imitate this, obviously, but this is just an example of how externally it can look like someone is breaking the detail, but actually following the principle. Now, Shringi is an example of someone who can look like he's actually following all of the details, but is breaking the principle. Because of the principle of all of these things, of the reason why we don't eat meat, it's not because, the only reason is because we only eat Krishna Prasad. And so you can't offer meat to Krishna. Sorry, I have a, okay. So this is the reason. There's not another reason. The reason that we don't engage in illicit sex is because everything is meant for Krishna. So the only sex that's meant for Krishna is if it's for procreation, if it's done in a proper way. So you're married, you do the proper samskaras, and you're actually going to raise this child properly in Krishna consciousness, then that is licit sex. Otherwise, it is illicit, right? So the difference between licit and illicit is Krishna in the center. The difference between eating sin and not eating sin is Krishna in the center. Because even if we have the most pure organic vegetarian meal, if it's not offered to Krishna, it's sin, right? We understand this from Bhagavad Gita. What is it? Yajnashishtashina santo muchante sarva kilbisai bunjate tvagam papa ye pachantyat makarnat. That the devotees of the Lord are released from all kinds of sin because they eat food which is first offered in sacrifice. Others who eat food for sense enjoyment verily eat only sin. It doesn't say others who eat meat only eat sin. It says food for sense enjoyment. So it's the consciousness, it's the mentality, right? So the point, so we can go through this with all of them. The point is, the reason these 4 rules are there is so we're actually following this one principle of do everything only for Krishna, right? But this is a subtle thing. We don't understand that yet. And so we are given these rules in a more tangible way. Okay, don't eat meat, don't have illicit sex, don't gamble, don't take intoxications. But why we do these things, it's all the same reason, right? So although Shringi wasn't hoarding gold, he wasn't gambling, he wasn't engaging in illicit sex, and he wasn't taking intoxication, he was breaking the principle, which is thinking oneself superior to the Supreme Lord, right? When we had that, what was it? What was this quote? Adyaham shashmi pasyatta me balam. Therefore, I shall take this matter upon myself and punish them. Just witness my power. That was the whole, right? And that's where Kali was able to infiltrate. So that being said, let me get back to, because I went off on these different tangents. Okay, so now back to the last sentence in today's purport. One should see the root cause of vitiation and not try to condemn the system as it is without knowledge of its scientific value, right? So referring to the Varnashram system. So it's easy for us to see that when someone does something wrong, right, we don't want to repeat that. And so it's easy for us to just say, okay, let's just wipe out the whole thing, right? It's not working. But we could see that this doesn't actually work, especially with, this is the system that Krishna gave us. So just for an example, let's say that we have where we grew. Let's say that where we grew up, our parents were terrible cooks. Our older siblings were terrible cooks, right? Obviously, eating is meant to nourish the body, right? That's the whole point of cooking, is that then you eat it and then it nourishes the body and it helps you maintain. But let's say someone is just such a terrible cook and you've had this long running experience of these terrible cooks and it's actually making you sick, right? Because it's not even properly made. It's food, the ingredients are rotten and they're actually making you sick. It's doing the opposite of what food's meant to do, right? It's meant to keep you healthy and it's actually making you sick. So one might say, so obviously this whole cooking thing is not working. So let's just throw the whole thing out. Let's throw the whole thing out. We're just going to stop this whole cooking, eating nonsense. And instead we're going to lay in the sand, whatever we come up with, right? And that's going to solve our problem. Somehow the sun's going to charge our bodies or something. The trees do it. Why not us? But we're ignoring the science there. Just because someone's doing something improperly, it doesn't mean that you throw away the whole science of the proper way to do it, right? Science means if you do it the right way, you get a proper result. And if you do it the wrong way, there's no way you're going to get a proper result. That's what science means. So it's not that you throw out cooking, it's that you understand how to properly use it, and then use it properly, and then go on and live your life healthily. So Srila Prabhupada is pointing out that we have to see the root cause of this vitiation and not condemn the system. So the root cause of the vitiation was this so-called Brahmana boy, this inexperienced, immature boy, thinking himself to be in the position of Krishna, right? That's the cause. This is also the cause of why these four regulative principles, why they're the problem. Because if we think we are in control, if we're taking that position of controller and or enjoyer, that is the root of it. It's not engaging in these things. Engaging in these things are a result of us thinking that we are on Krishna's level as the controller and or the enjoyer. So we have to identify that root cause. When we identify that root cause, we can engage in this science properly. And the science has value. Krishna designed it in such a way that no matter what level we are on, we can use our very unique conditioned nature to gradually elevate our consciousness from self-centric to God-centric to Krishna-centric. And we do that by just engaging in our daily activities in a very scientific, specific way that is given by Krishna through the system of Varnashrama Dharma. I have so much more, and I have so little time, so I'm just going to try to wrap this up. I apologize for that. Sometimes I go through all my notes very quickly, and there's a whole lot of time, and sometimes, we're almost toward the end, and I have so many more notes. So I apologize for that. Anyway, so the root cause of this vitiation is that we are seeing things, including our very selves, as disconnected from Krishna, right? And so we're trying to take his place in controlling and enjoying. This is the cause of suffering, right? All of the problems in the world. Seeing ourselves as the center instead of factually recognizing that Krishna is the center and acting accordingly. We don't understand Sambandha, right? Sambandha means the relationships between us and Krishna. If we think that we're on the same level of Krishna that we can control and enjoy, then we don't understand Sambandha. We don't know the relationship. Krishna is the supreme whole. We are a fragmental part. He is the supreme controller and in the enjoyer, and we serve him, right? Krishna-centric, not self-centric. So until we actually understand that, we don't have the proper Sambandha. That means we don't understand the proper relationship. Therefore, our actions are not going to be proper, so improper abhideya. And so we also will not get the proper goal. Our prayojana will also be wrong. Just as we were saying in any science, if you don't do it properly, you can't get the right result. So, as mentioned at the end of the purport, the system of Varnashrama has scientific value. It's personally designed by Krishna to help us engage our unique natures in his service. And if we follow it correctly, we'll get the proper result. If we don't, then we won't. Okay, then in these circumstances, because this all seems like pretty daunting, right? We may feel that there's no hope, right? There are so many precedences that seem to be conflicting in the Shastra, right? We read through Shastra and we see examples of this, we see examples of that. We may feel that we can't understand them properly. We might feel that we don't have the intellectual capability to fully understand what is to be applied where and when appropriately. We may just have strong attachments of doing things in a particular way, and we're not open to trying to make changes for fear that, okay, maybe it's actually not authorized. Maybe it's someone's interpretation of it, right? We may think that in the absence of a proper king, for example, there's no hope of us having protection, the protection that we need in order to to thrive, right? So this can seem daunting. It may keep us from even attempting to try to actually understand this properly. But life in the material world actually means continuously and endlessly dealing with these daunting circumstances. Trying to deal with these by relying on our own prowess will only perpetuate the suffering, because it is the cause of our suffering, right? We think that we are the controller or the enjoyer. That is the cause of our suffering. So if we try to fix it by our own prowess, we're just continuing that suffering. The only way to escape this is to learn how to properly see Krishna as the center and act accordingly. And this is done by hearing, conversing, understanding, and most importantly, applying the principles given in Shastra, as explained by our Guru, as shown by the examples of the sadhus. Now, as I touched on a little bit before, this does not require academic intelligence. It only requires sincerity, dedication, and determination. We don't have to be big academic scholars to be able to understand, okay, but here, this is what happened here, this is what happened, how do I understand, what is to be done now? Because the thing is this, all of the Vedas is aimed at one thing. Vedascha sarvamaham eva vidyo. Of all of the Vedas, Krishna is to be known, right? So all of the different scenarios that are going on, all of the different precedences, the answer is always, will this solution bring us to actually understand Krishna more? If that is the case, then it's the right decision. If it's not going to help you actually understand Krishna more, if in other words, if your solution is keeping Krishna in the center, then it's a good solution. If your solution is based on your whim, putting you in the center, then it is not the correct conclusion of Shastra. Then that is a misuse of Shastra, right? And it is a justification of misbehavior, just as we were talking about. So in conclusion, we should not use Shastra, or anything else for that matter, to justify our misbehavior. We, as aspiring Vaishnavas, are meant to become gentle. We learned that from the Srila Prabhupada's commentary on Ramaharshana Sutta. If we are not yet on the platform of gentleness, right, we have a long way to go, no problem. We should exercise patience in passing judgment. So don't pass judgment until we actually thoroughly consulted Shastra with the proper mood. Not just quick look up in Shastra to see, oh, is there a way that I could actually punish this person? Is there precedence of that? No, understanding in the proper mood, what actually was happening in this past time, what were the circumstances, what's the result? There's also going to be examples in Shastra where someone applied a principle incorrectly and they had to suffer because of that. So we can learn from all this stuff if we approach Shastra with the proper mood. So first we have to learn what is proper behavior, and then we have to act accordingly, at least gradually, right? Otherwise, if we continue to try to justify our misbehavior, it means that we are not taking Krishna consciousness seriously. And so if we're not taking it seriously, we can't expect the actual result. It's a science. So I went longer than I normally do, and I apologize for that, but I want to open it up and see if there are any questions or comments on what we discussed today. Max, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you for us. I believe you touched on it, but I was wondering, like in this instance, like with these two characters involved, like previously we see Maharaj Parikshit performing his duty of chastising the Sudra just as a king, and there was also punishment of death there potentially. And then we see this instance with Shringi, and so I'm wondering that what's that difference in their mood and their role and how they executed it.
Good question. So the threat of death was there because Kali Raj as a Shudra in the form of the whole scenario, he wasn't following culture, Vedic culture. He was beating a cow. That is actually punishable by death. But he didn't act quickly. He wanted to understand what the actual circumstance was. So he asked the victim, okay, you tell me what's going on, right? And they said, oh, actually, it's not his fault. It's not my fault. It's, it's just the way things go. And so then he goes to the person. He says, okay, well, now you tell me what's going on. He says, well, I'm surrendered unto you. So please give me some place to stay. Now, Kshatriya, if someone's surrendered unto them, they will not kill them. If they're actually surrendered unto them, if they're trying to play a ruse, then that's another thing. But so unarmed, and he's begging for mercy. So a proper Kshatriya will give that mercy, right? So Shringi, on the other hand, he got some slightly inaccurate information from someone, and he immediately acted. He didn't verify any of the facts. He didn't try to get the he didn't try to understand what the circumstances were that were surrounding this incident, right? He thought a live snake was placed on his father, and the snake bit his father and killed him, and therefore this Kshatriya, he's no Kshatriya actually. He's the, I keep forgetting exactly how that was worded, the most wretched of his dynasty, right? And so he doesn't take the time to figure out, oh, is any of this actually true, or am I just actually acting on a whim? And then he considered, so Maharaj Parikshit, while this was all going on, he is understanding that he's a representative of Krishna, and that's why he was going to deal out that punishment as a representative of Krishna. But as a representative of Krishna, he also wanted to get all the facts straight first. And then when Kali Raj submitted to him and asked for shelter as a representative of Krishna, he gave that shelter. Shringi, on the other hand, he thought he was a representative of Krishna, but he wasn't actually representing what Krishna would have done, right? Of course, this was all arranged by Krishna to happen in this exact way, because otherwise, like I said, Maharaj Parikshit would have just kept ruling the way he was ruling, and no one would have broken any rules, and Kali wouldn't have, been able to thrive. And Kali's meant to thrive. So this is just one of those things that had to happen in this particular way. But this Brahmana was wrong. And as Srila Prabhupada points out, this was the beginning of the downfall of the caste system. If one is improperly trained, in other words, if one is going through the training and has potential, but then takes it upon themselves and tries to flex their prowess to show others, now I'm going to take this upon myself and punish it, just behold my power. If that attitude is there, it means that you do not understand anything about Brahminical culture, right? So this consciousness that Shringi had, that was the problem. It's not that, there is such a thing as punishment and there's such a thing as being a representative of Krishna and punishing on his behalf. Those are all true things. But if they're done improperly with this mentality, this consciousness that I am actually the controller of this situation because I have the prowess, that's the problem. And so is that okay? Does that show the difference between those situations? And
Yes,
Acharya
Prabhu.
Prabhu, yeah. Did you want to add on that, Acharya Prabhu?
Yeah, sorry, Krishna, if you don't mind, I would.
Yeah, please.
Another important distinction, important in my mind, is that if, for example, someone offends me, my practice should be to be tolerant, to be forgiving, or if someone acts badly due to an accidental fall down or make some mistake, it's my duty to be very tolerant and forgiving and helpful. But in a situation where an innocent person is being harmed, then all bets are off, in my opinion. That's the time when you have to act very strongly and very quickly, Kshatriya or not.
Okay.
All right, Krishna, thank you.
Good point. Thank you. Now, one might argue that in both of these situations, because Shringi, he was acting on behalf of his innocent father, who was being, he thought was being improperly treated. So he didn't get all of the facts. So it wasn't wrong that he acted. It was just wrong that he didn't verify what was actually going on and then act accordingly. If that makes sense. is that still in line with what you were saying, Acharya Prabhu?
Sure, that makes perfect sense to me.
Okay, yeah. So as Acharya Prabhu pointed out, we could take offenses all day, but as soon as someone tries to offend a devotee or the deity, for example, Kshatriya or not, we jump in because we are Krishna's servants. An example I give often is if we're in the temple room, even if you're the most meek, humble, non-violent, non-confrontational person, if you see someone walking toward the deity with a sledgehammer, you will get between the deity and that person, even if they're the biggest person you've ever seen, because you have complete faith that Krishna will protect you, and that it's more important to protect Krishna than your own body, right? And so that will just happen. But it is also important that we understand that we shouldn't be going by, as Shringi did, we shouldn't just be going by what somebody said and not verify what's actually going on, and then cause a problem. And in Shringi's case, he caused a problem for all of Varnashram, right? Because he didn't have the proper training and understanding to properly act on the information, and so it caused an issue. But if we see that it is an actual issue and it's verified, and then yes, as Acharya Prabhu said, then all bets are off, and then we have to act. Thank you, Acharya Prabhu, for bringing that aspect, and that's an important aspect to know. Is there anything else?
Just want to thank you for the wonderful class.
Thank you, Brihad Vardhanka Prabhu. Kalpesh Prabhu, yes.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, please accept my humble obeisances. Thank you very much. Very excellent class. I have to read one more time. I have written this thing. So I wanted to ask, in this Krishna consciousness process, we are trying to learn the shastras, but we have which likes to discriminate all the time between the right and wrong judgments. Like shastras entirely, or I don't know, there is a struggle that what is right, and constantly when we are even trying to practice, we try to end up complaining or criticizing. I'm not sure how, in which way the doubts or certain they are in certain situations. That's where how to discriminate properly, if we don't become reactive to certain situations, we don't have to react. So this is the constant pull and push kind of thing, so I'm not sure what will help. You mentioned somewhere one of the qualities, one, but would that shastras should be properly understood? Is that what will make somebody progress in the path of Krishna consciousness? I'm just trying to come to that fundamental principle, even sometimes it is for Krishna, like you mentioned that sledgehammer will come and then you will definitely take hit on, but you will protect Krishna. But same have Krishna consciousness and meet in those situations, but experiences reactions to those things, sometimes, and not necessarily it is my behavior, or it could be other. So that is where the struggle is. I don't know if I put it properly. If you want to tell something on that, and
Thank you. You're sort of cutting in and out, so I didn't get everything that you were saying, but I think I got the gist of it. If I start answering something that you didn't actually ask, interrupt me, please. Yes. But basically, it's about discrimination and how to act properly and not impulsively, right? Is that essentially? Yes. Okay. One thing, I'll give you a little story about something that took me over 10 years to actually realize. And then once I realized that I felt like an idiot for not knowing it before, it's a subtle thing. So long ago, this was 95. I had this prayer that I wrote that I would say every night before I went to bed. And it was a fairly long one, but one part of the prayer was that I was praying to Krishna to help me be able to determine the difference between Maya's test and Krishna's mercy. And my concern was that I didn't want to accidentally accept a test from Maya thinking that it was Krishna's mercy, and then, that would be trouble. But simultaneously, I also didn't want to miss out on Krishna's mercy. So if something was coming as Krishna's mercy and I thought, oh, maybe this is a test from Maya, I didn't want to miss out on that potential Krishna's mercy because I misunderstood that it was a test from Maya. And this was a genuine concern of mine for, like I said, more than 10 years, that I thought that somehow I could actually miss out on Krishna's mercy if I was wrongly convinced that it might be a test from Maya. And conversely, I may think that something's actually Krishna's mercy and it's actually Maya's test. And so I was racking my brain for over a decade, and I was worried. It was stressing me out, But then it's such a simple answer, is that Krishna's mercy, it doesn't work like that. It's not like, okay, this is Krishna's mercy. If you take it, you have it. If you don't take it, you don't have it. That's not how Krishna's mercy works. Krishna's mercy is transcendental. So if Krishna's giving you his mercy and you're thinking, oh, I better not take that because it might be a test from Maya, Krishna's actually going to give you more mercy because he sees that, wow, this aspiring devotee is so focused on only accepting what he actually understands as Krishna's mercy that he's reluctant to take this. So not only are you going to get that original mercy, but then you're going to get more mercy because you're using the proper consciousness to reject that particular thing. And also the same thing with the whole test from Maya. If Maya is actually testing you, and this can go back to the example of Haridas Thakur, which we shouldn't imitate, but we can learn this lesson from it, that this was a test. And later, the same thing happened, and it literally was a test from Maya Devi personified, that she also came to him, and he also did not succumb to that. So he just took everything as Krishna's mercy, right? And so Maya is not able to infiltrate if your consciousness is pure. So if your consciousness is pure, even though something legitimately might be Maya Devi herself, right? If your consciousness is pure, then all you're going to experience is Krishna's mercy, right? It's this consciousness is the most important thing, and it can't be gauged on a material level. So there's no question of missing out on Krishna's mercy because you didn't accept something thinking that it might be a test of Maya. Krishna's mercy is going to come to you, right? In a different way, maybe, whatever, but you can't not get Krishna's mercy. And you can't accidentally, if your consciousness is pure and you're accepting something to use in Krishna's service and it just happened to be a test of Maya, you're actually now going to use it properly in Krishna's service. Therefore, you passed that test, right? So that's how that works. So I think that also applies to your question, because it's the consciousness that matters, right? So if we focus on that consciousness, then we're not going to become overreactive to certain situations. If we focus on the consciousness instead of the detail, we'll see, okay, well, I'm not sure exactly what detail should happen, but I know that, I have to do this for Krishna, not for me. And so therefore you do your best to serve Krishna in that particular scenario, knowing that Krishna is in control, and then leaving it up to him. That's essentially what we have to do in these situations, and that's what we become trained to do. And the more we study Shastra, the more our external activities will also come in line with that pure consciousness. And so we'll be developing that pure consciousness. Does that make sense, Kalpeshwar?
Yeah, it did, but it was little confusing me.
Sorry.
understand, because I know you are saying the right thing, I am sure, because you spent 10 years thinking about it and now you are coming with answers on it. So you have in that filter into your heart.
It's also possible that I misunderstood your question. Rohini Mataji, did you want to add something to what we're discussing, or is it something else?
It's related. I was just wondering, like, along the same lines, like, how do you differentiate between Krishna's actual involvement in your life and saying that, like, your life is is Krishna's plan, everything that's happening is Krishna's plan, versus your karma from the past just playing out on like autopilot? Like, how do you know when he's actually involved and when it's just your karma algorithm playing out?
That's a great question. The answer that he's always involved, whether it's our karma playing out or not. It's just a matter of whether we're seeing him or not. So again, it comes down to what our consciousness is. If we are engaging in our karma that's playing out and thinking that we are the controller and the enjoyer of it, then we're not going to see Krishna in it. That's just how it is. But if we are able to see Krishna in these things, then it can look exactly like our karma playing out, but now we're dealing with them in a very different way, right? We're dealing with them not as me being the enjoyer, but we're using these things that we have experience of, that we understand how these particular things work. And now we can actually use them properly in Krishna service instead of using them to satisfy my senses, right? So we're using the same ingredients, and it may look, from an outside point of view, it may look like we're doing the exact same thing. But if the consciousness has changed, then we are actually seeing Krishna. Krishna is always there no matter what. But when we change that consciousness, we are actually perceiving and appreciating Krishna's presence in these particular things, and then using them in the right way instead of using them in the incorrect way. Like, for example, if someone's a chef their whole life before they were introduced to Krishna consciousness, they're very expert at cooking. They'll still cook expertly, but now they're cooking expertly for Krishna. So the food is still going to taste quite delicious because they know how to, do everything, But now they're understanding that actually this is for Krishna. So then it's no longer material food that tastes great. It's material food that tastes great that's transformed into spiritual food, prasadam, that then has not just that material effect that most people will appreciate of good taste, but it also uplifts their soul, right? So it may look externally like the exact same thing, but since that consciousness is now uncovered to some degree, now they're seeing Krishna, they're appreciating Krishna like that. Did that address what you were saying?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, good. And then, so Kalpesh, I'm sorry that got confusing. There's a chance that I misunderstood what you said because it kept cutting out.
Yeah, no, Prabhuji, you probably understood the question. It is my not able to understand what you are trying to say. It's not my inability, I would say.
The good news is, because like I said, when I went through those 10 years of not understanding that, it's not that I didn't hear the right answer, because I heard the right answer. That's why after I got that, when it clicked, I felt like an idiot because I already knew that. I actually even was preaching the exact same things from Gita, but I just didn't make that connection before. So it could be a similar thing like that. So the solution is to just keep approaching Shastra with that proper mood. Mm-hmm. It's not that, okay, I am intellectual, I'm going to find these things and now I will understand and then I'll be able to apply in my life. No. That's not what we do. We approach it with the mood of, Krishna, everything is in your hands. All the intelligence that I have comes from you. All of, every quality comes from you. And so I just want to understand you. I want to stop thinking just in terms of me, this selfish behavior. I want to give this up. I want to be engaged in your service. Please reveal to me how I can properly do this. And then, so if we do that in that mood, And then, like I said, we inquire properly from the guru, submissive, humbly, and with an attitude of service. We have to give something in return for that valuable gift that they're given, and follow the example of the sadhus. Then gradually these things just become clearer and clearer and clearer. And then we just, so first we have to, when we come to these situations, we actually have to sort of use our intelligence and discrimination, like you said, to figure out what exactly I should be doing. And then as we become steady in it and actually start getting a taste, then we actually find that we're doing these things automatically. Because currently, most of us currently in the material conditioning, we act automatically based on our previous experiences, our mundane logic, etc. And so it's we're acting spontaneously, but it's based on material things. So once we replace those material samskars with spiritual samskars, then we'll just find that actually our automatic thought process is not going through situations that we've encountered, movies that we've watched, etc. But it's actually going through the Shastra. We're actually thinking of pastimes of Krishna and how things were dealt with the pure devotees of the Lord, instead of thinking, of, like I said, like a mundane movie or something like that, or some experience that we had in school. So we find that as we give more importance to Shastra than to the other previous samskars that we had that weren't related to Krishna at all, when we start replacing those, then we see that just automatically that becomes our thought process. Those voices in our head aren't from famous actors and comedians and sports figures and singers. It's actually from sadhus, right? And so when that happens, we know, okay, we're in good shape, we're on the right path, and keep going in that direction. We shouldn't ever at one point think, haha, just see now, just like Shringi was. He was thinking, okay, so Krishna's gone, so now I'm gonna take care of this, and before I even figure out what the situation was, I'm going to act rashly, kill this wretch of the dynasty, right? We have to make sure we don't do that. At no point should we become proud and think that now I have this knowledge. We should think, okay, thank you, Krishna, for giving me this particular bit of understanding. I know I have a whole lot more to understand, so please allow me to, engage in your service and understand more and more, like that. So if we have the right mood, and we're determined and we're dedicated to understanding Shastra as it is, not as we want it to be, then everything will gradually work out quite well for us. I hope that made sense.
Yeah, Prabhuji, I'm getting that connection slowly. I'm probably, you're saying those words, it's your beautiful realizations and reflections on this. So you have lived that, I have not lived that life. So maybe I'm hearing those words, but some are like having a lot of gaps in my own understandings. So I will meditate more on it, and probably I would like to revisit like one more time when not now, but when in another sessions, the struggle between the Maya testing and Krishna mercy. I am interested to know more about it, because that is where the behavior reactionary would matter to me. Which is what you rightly pointed out.
Sure. And don't feel too discouraged, because there are so many things that I also still don't understand. Like I said, these things took me about over 10 years to actually click, but there's still so many other things that still haven't clicked with me, things that we're always hearing that, obviously we haven't been able to apply. So we shouldn't become discouraged by it, but just that should help us double down on our dedication and our determination to really focus on Shastra, and to leave some of the other things behind, these things in our material lives that we're giving a lot of importance and time and energy to. We can sort of wean off of those things gradually, put more attention on the Shastra, and then we'll see that actually that will change our lives as much as we can, comfortably do. Okay, so we've gone over quite a bit. I thank all of you for hanging around. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripasindhubhyascha paritanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha.
Krishna, thank you.
Hare Krishna.